Hello and welcome back to Next Gen Console Watch, our show following everything happening with the latest gaming hardware. I'm Max Scoville, filling in for Daemon, who is currently in Brazil covering gamescom latam. And joining me today are Ryan McCaffrey from Podcast Unlocked, IGN's Xbox podcast.
Howdy, Max.
Hello. And Jada Griffin, IGN's community lead and a regular not only on Beyond, our PlayStation podcast, but also Nintendo Voice Chat, which is, as the name suggests, about Nintendo.
Hey Max, how's it going?
Hey, not too bad. So today's big question is, we've heard a lot of rumors about an Xbox handheld from Microsoft. There's a lot of rumblings about that. And we have we are definitely getting a successor to the Nintendo Switch 2. And the big question, I think right now, is which of these are we going to get an official announcement for first? Now, Ryan, I want to hear your thoughts about the Xbox handheld, where we are on that. How legitimate is this thing? What do we actually know?
Well, we were lucky enough to have head of Xbox Phil Spencer at IGN Live, our big in-person fan event that we had earlier this month. And my last question to Phil, before we brought some other developers on stage, was, hey, what about this Xbox handheld that's been rumored?
You've been building the business around this mantra of go where the players are. Whether it's on PC, whether it's through the cloud.
So we should have a handheld.
I think so.
I think we should have a handheld.
Do you want to say anything about
No, I don't want to say it. I think you have to have Sarah on. Sarah Bond, our president of Xbox, which is awesome. But the future for us in hardware is pretty awesome. And the work that the team is doing around different form factors, different ways to play, I'm incredibly excited about.
He basically said they're doing a handheld without officially saying, yes, we are doing a handheld. You have to it's the CEO speak that when you do this long enough, as I have, you kind of learn to interpret through the various ways that they like to phrase things. But no, for real, Phil Spencer all but said they're doing a handheld. And I followed that up by asking, well, if this hypothetical handheld were to come out, would it be more of a Wi-Fi enabled device, a la PlayStation Portal, or more of a native piece of hardware in your hands, like a Steam Deck, like a Nintendo Switch? And he very definitively said, we'd want to do it as a native piece of hardware in your hands with the games running right on that. So yeah, the question is just when. And we actually did talk about this on Podcast Unlocked this week. It came up because Microsoft said that they're going to have their biggest presence ever at Gamescom, which is now the biggest gaming event of the year, now that E3 is no longer, and we have the cool Summer Game Fest play days, which is great, but Gamescom's the big one now. And so Microsoft's not, at least they haven't announced that they're doing their own showcase, but there's the opening night live showcase. Could a handheld be announced there? My sense is that the soonest we might hear about a handheld could be at the Game Awards, and I say that because, number one, Microsoft's going to want to reach as many people with that announcement as possible, and not just the people that are already in the Xbox tent like me. So, the Game Awards is a great venue for that. Plus, they announced the Series X at the Game Awards, so it is not out of the question for them to make a hardware announcement at the Game Awards. If that happened, I think it would probably be a pretty top-level, just, here's what it looks like kind of thing. Probably no date, definitely no specs or price. And then I would think down the road, whether it's at the 2025 Xbox showcase or something ahead of that, there might be a deeper dive Microsoft event where they go into detail on it. But I definitely think it's coming. I mean, you can listen to the Phil thing for yourself from IGN Live, but it's just a question of when. But I'm excited for it.
Very cool. Now, Jada, we know that there's going to be a successor to the Switch because it would be real weird if Nintendo just suddenly stopped making, consoles or handhelds. What do we actually know about the Super Switch, Switch 2, Switch Advance, whatever it's called?
So not really a whole lot. We know that there are dev kits supposedly going around, and that some developers have gotten hands-on with it, but not been able to see it. Kind of weird thing. So not actual dev kits out, I should say, but we've been told that they're able to touch it without seeing it, which is just kind of the weirdest way to kind of introduce the people who are going to be expecting to make games for this next console to the next console they're developing on. But it's, I really think that the good news is that Nintendo is they don't really have to do a whole lot with the next console. They're probably going to do some type of zig that when they're, people are expecting the zag, but the Switch has such a massive install base right now and such a great library of games that the big thing they've got to do with the next console is include backwards compatibility, and that's going to win over a lot of people. So that's the big thing for me, and I know a lot of fans out there. Outside of that, we really don't know a whole lot more. They keep in front of all their Nintendo Directs, they keep saying, "Hey, there's not going to be any announcement on hardware in this Direct." So they're being very deliberate about their communication on this next Switch console, because they don't want that news to kind of overshadow the other things that they still have coming out. They just had the big Nintendo Direct earlier this month as well, where they showcased a ton of new games that are coming: Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, the new Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom, Mario and Luigi Brothership. So they still have a lot of stuff coming towards the end of this year and next year. But it'll be interesting to see how their strategy shifts up once they formally do announce this next Switch 2 console.
Now, the big thing that's changed since the Switch launched is the sort of advent of other handheld gaming device. I mean, there for a second there, it was Nintendo and Sony were the only ones who were messing with that, and now we have Valve and presumably Microsoft throwing their little handheld hats into the ring. Do you think the Switch needs to worry, or the Switch 2 needs to worry about that, or Nintendo needs to worry about competition, or is it just kind of doing its own thing?
I mean, Nintendo has always prided itself on running its own race. Like, they don't need to worry about the competition, but I don't think they can just ignore the competition either. I think they need to pay attention to what Valve specifically is doing with with the Steam Deck, and that fans are really enjoying about it. The fact that, I don't think we see a Nintendo console that's kind of like more open platform where you can just install Windows and Linux on it, but I do think that they are going to want to maybe open it up to other things that fans and users in their community, their audience, that want on a handheld console. Switch is pretty much the only console you really don't use streaming apps, and I'm not saying that's a big thing, but there's a lot of people that use their PlayStations and Xboxes for streaming, so it could be something that Nintendo might want to consider including in their next console. I think the big thing is also just kind of however their network, their net code and their network is going to work for the next console, because that's often a big drawback for some people with playing games online on Switch is sometimes the network isn't great. So figuring out a way to kind of shore that up to be comparable to the Steam Deck is probably in their best interest.
Now, you mentioned streaming. Streaming of games is, of course, a thing that I feel like we're still trying to make fetch happen over there, and some people are into it. There's all sorts of ways to go about doing it. Sony recently launched a sort of handheld. It is a handheld device, the Portal. The people who have it love it. It's hard to call it like a PlayStation Portable, though. It's very much, it's kind of its own thing. Jada, do you see any possibility where Sony releases a conventional, good old-fashioned dedicated handheld, to answer the Switch 2 and the whatever the Microsoft thing is called?
I think maybe after the Switch 2 and the Microsoft handheld drop, they could potentially do that, because there might be enough time since the Portal has dropped, so it doesn't look like that. It won't anger fans who bought the Portal and I bought this and now I got to buy another handheld that's better that I wanted originally, and I feel like I wasted $200 on this device. The Portal is a great device if you have perfect conditions. If you're in a good location with solid internet and you're hardwired in on your console and you've got good Wi-Fi coverage, it's a great console, great handheld for that. Outside of that, it gets a little bit tougher to use and have that top-notch experience that you want when you're playing on a PlayStation console. But I could see, like I said before, I could see them maybe down the road announcing something that is like the Portal 2 and it's got enhanced features. That way they're not totally throwing away the Portal name and the Portal fan base, and just be like, hey, it's time to upgrade. We've got a new handheld that's better now. I could see them going that route.
That feels like a Wii U in reverse right there.
Yes.
I mean, it's the problem with the Portal is that it's basically an add-on that turns a Wii into a Wii U. It's sort of just it's a controller with a screen on it, which is, the people who are cool with that, they're cool with that. But I think a lot of people do want, a proper dedicated handheld. For the longest time, a handheld was sort of like a diet junior version of the base console. The Switch obviously combines the sort of the Game Boy family with the, Nintendo home console family. Ryan, if Microsoft were to come out with a handheld, where do you think that would live in terms of sort of power level? Do you have any, hypothesis about that?
My hope and desire is that it's comes along with the next generation Xbox and effectively replaces the Series S, and is the lower powered, more budget priced version of the premium desktop console. I'm probably not going to get that wish though, because the Steam Deck isn't cheap, and just getting a sufficient level of horsepower enough for the next generation Xbox is probably not going to be doable at a reasonable price point to consumers. But I don't think it's completely out of the question. So that's what I would love to see. More likely, it's probably just going to be kind of a third pillar, an optional pillar in the Xbox ecosystem, since Microsoft has spent this entire generation just having their mantra be, we want to put our games wherever players are. So if one of those devices is a handheld device that's maybe it's less powerful than a Series S even potentially, but if it's only running games in 1080p, or I can't imagine they'd go lower than that, but if it's a 1080p device, well, then you can get away with a little bit less horsepower since you're not outputting as high a resolution. But yeah, my dream is that it is effectively the Switch, but for the next generation Xbox as the lower power variant that you can dock and play on your TV at home, or just grab it and go and play it anywhere you want.
Yeah, the Series S has been a little bit of a headache for Microsoft, I'm sure, this generation, because it has less power, which means that developers have to accommodate it. But I feel like that having less features of an Xbox Series game on the Xbox Series Portable, or whatever they decide to call it, people are going to be much more willing to forgive that than they would for the Series S, which was promised as like a full-featured device.
Series P, I guess, right? Series Portable.
Yeah. Series
P, that's they've named things worse stuff. What would you call it?
That's true. That is a good question. I've not been a fan of Xbox's naming conventions overall, but granted, it's not like Sony. They landed on PlayStation, which stuck, and have just gone with numbered sequels. But I don't know. That would be a fun. Maybe the Xbox Anywhere, something like that, could be fun. Maybe that's too long. Too many syllables.
The Xbox Miniware.
Yeah,
mini, and you take
there's definitely some fun you could have with that. But I'd have to, come back to me on the next episode, and I'll get a good list together for you.
Okay. Well, next episode, I'm sure there'll be something to talk about. Obviously, there's a lot of Gamescoms going on this year. There's Gamescom LATAM. There's Gamescom coming up in Europe in August, and then I believe in October there's Gamescom Asia. So there's plenty of occasions for new stuff to get announced. That's not even counting the Game Awards or whatever surprise Sony showcases we get between now and then. So hopefully we get some kind of announcements. I know Nintendo has said we are not going to get a hardware announcement this year, but who knows? Maybe they'll change their mind. On that note, that just about does it for this episode of Next Gen Console Watch. Thank you so much to our crew, everybody working behind the scenes to make this happen. We have a poll for next week. Which would you want a handheld from? I'm curious to see what people are actually gravitating towards. We've got the options are, Nintendo, the Switch 2, which feels like the biggest sort of known quantity. There's Microsoft's Xbox handheld. There's a Sony PS Vita 2, which seems like the most unlikely of all these. And then, of course, there's Valve's successor to the Steam Deck, which feels like an inevitability at this point. Make sure to go vote at IGN.com the day this episode goes live. And that'll do it for this episode. Ryan, Jada, thank you so much for hanging out and talking about handhelds with me. And again, thank you to everybody working behind the scenes to make this episode possible. I'm Max. We'll be back next week. We'll see you then.